The essence of meditation is the experience of being the field in which what's happening is happening, the space in which what's happening is happening, without logging on, without engaging, without mounting, without, it's like Mooji says, thoughts are auditioning for your attention. The reason he's saying auditioning for your attention is because the thoughts are presenting themselves in such a way that it seems as though they're important, or it seems as though they're thoughts that you should attend to. This is the default state, It's the default state that we live in the world of thinking. Our lives are a process of thinking, so that we're thinking our way through our lives. We're thinking about life instead of experiencing life. That's the difference between seeing and having a perception. A perception is an interpretation of what's there. Seeing is just aware of what's there. And that's why we focus on the breath. We're focusing on the breath so that we can have an experience of not engaging with thought, right? So when your attention is on the breath, it's not on thinking. Thoughts may occur, and one of the aspects of the practice of meditation is that when your focus is on the breath and thoughts occur, can you allow the thoughts to be there without your attention going to the thought and then staying in the thought stream? And gradually over time, you can begin to notice that the awareness, the possibility is that the awareness can be aware of what's happening without being distracted by it, without being engaged with it, without identifying with it. And this is necessary for you to experience what you are. To experience what you are, you need to be able to be aware of the awareness that's there and know that the awareness is what you are. It's aware of itself. And as Rupert was saying, to the extent that this becomes something that you get good at, that you get familiar with, that you get used to, you can have it become a consistent way of being in the world. We practice it in meditation because it's easier here, right? But where you want to get to, as he said, when he said open your eyes, when you open your eyes, there's a lot more possibility of things getting your attention, right? So then can you practice as you move around in the world, as you're driving in traffic, as you're around other people, even as you're interacting with other people, to notice that the awareness is never not here, it's always here, right? And the awareness can be aware of everything that's happening in the awareness. What other people say and do, what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, what your physical sensations are. All of that's happening in awareness, right? But it is not what you are. What you are is the space in which it's occurring. And so that's what we're practicing, making that distinction when we sit in meditation. And of course, obviously it's called a practice because it takes time, right? Because the orientation that we all have is to identify with thoughts all the time. It's the default state, and for most people, the experience of not attending to thoughts can be threatening, can bring up fear. I'm losing control, I don't know what's going on. I need to think about this. I need to keep thinking so I feel safe. When in reality, it's important to appreciate and understand that while there may be a fear in the background at all times, which is the case for most of humanity, there's a fear in the background at all times, a fear of disappearing, right? We call it death, right? A fear that I'm going to disappear. If I move my attention away from thinking, how will I know where I am, you know? And so this is something that this is what the letting go is. Letting go of being attached to thinking or feelings or concepts. Practicing letting go of being attached to those things and experiencing the freedom of awareness and experiencing that you don't disappear. In fact, it's the opposite. When you're thinking, you disappear, right? When you're thinking, who you actually are disappears because you're in the illusion, you're in the idea of yourself. When you're thinking, it's like, you know, it's the you that you think you are that's thinking, right? So that's the world you're in, right? And that's when you're not here. That's why we talk about awareness as being present. When you're in your head, you're not present. And being in your head is the way most people are living their lives, and that's where the suffering comes from, because when you're in your head, you're in a state of limitation, you're in a state of mind, you're in a state of identifying yourself as a separate being, a limited person, right? And in that state, in that condition, there's resistance. You know, like he said in the guided meditation, you know, the awareness doesn't know what resistance is. Awareness is just being present. There is no resistance to anything. And that's where there's no suffering, because suffering is a function of resistance, because science doesn't know what consciousness is. And they speak about consciousness as a difficult problem for science, right? And it's always going to be a difficult problem for science, because science, the essence of science has to do with being able to quantify something. And so because that's the essence of science, science can never understand consciousness. It's formless. You can't measure it, right? And so according to science, science defines reality as that which has form, exists in time, and takes up space. That's what they define to be real. And that's all they can deal with, is that's what's real. But consciousness doesn't fit any of those qualifications. And so science will never be able to understand consciousness. So here's something that I picked up this morning. Meditation is the practice of dying. When the sense of a personal separate self dies, the world and all one's thoughts and perceptions about it and everything else dies. It's like being a newborn infant in each moment, because you are free of attachment to all thoughts and beliefs. This is why awakening is called dying before you die. It's why I called my book, you know, Dying to Live. Everything about you has died, yet the physical body remains alive. There is never again the same you from one moment to the next. At the same time, what is here remains eternally changeless. From that moment on, your body may die, but you cannot. Having neither birth nor death, you remain eternally free. Meditation is the practice of dying. At first, we don't know this. We think we are accomplishing something, or we have some goal. It took 20 years of daily meditation practice before I knew how to die. A near-death experience probably helped with this. If people knew that meditation is the practice of dying, almost nobody would begin. Their fear, resistance, and basic survival mechanism would prevent this, so we don't tell them. We pretend they are going to accomplish something: inner peace, happiness, less stress, freedom from thoughts, enlightenment. We don't tell them that true meditation is the practice of dying. We don't tell them that the only way to really accomplish these things is to die. When all illusions you experience as you, your life, and the world die, only then do you realize that peace, happiness, love, and enlightenment have always been here. You were just too distracted by thoughts about you and your life to notice. So one of the reasons that I consider death to be important to consider and look at is because, and even if you listen to what was said there, your mind may start to react, right? Because your mind is afraid that it's going to disappear, that you're going to disappear. The thing about this is that what there is to realize about death is that it doesn't exist. Real freedom is the freedom that you recognize when you realize that the only way death could be real is if something was born and then it dies. And part of these teachings and practices is to realize that if you look at awareness, not think about it, but if you look at awareness, you can't see any beginning. It's just here. It just is. You can't find any beginning, right? So if it didn't begin, then it must not be able to end. And it's confusing for people because we learn through our conditioning that when the body was born, you were born, right? We learn through conditioning that when the body was born, you were born, and we learn to identify with the body. And so then we believe that when the body dies, you die. But in these teachings, as the teachers say, your actual experience, not what you think or believe, but your actual experience is that you weren't born. The awareness that you are simply is present. You can't see, if you look, you can't see any beginning. You can't see any end. You can't see any limits to it. You can't see any distance between the awareness and what it's aware of. That's what he was saying in the guided meditation. You can't, if you look at your actual experience, you don't experience time. You don't experience time. Time is a concept, right? You don't actually experience distance. Distance is a concept. Distance is a conditioned way of seeing. When you look at awareness, and you see it for what it actually is, what you're aware of and the awareness are the same thing. You can see this. This is experience. You can see this. This is experiential. What you're seeing right now and the awareness of what you're seeing right now is the same thing. There is no distance. And that awareness and what you're seeing right now is not only the same thing, it's what you are. And that's all there is. When you can begin to see that and begin to recognize that this is the truth, this is reality, right? Along with that recognition comes the freedom, the recognition that nothing that appears in awareness can affect awareness, like nothing that appears in this room can affect the room, can affect the space of the room. So it takes time for us to come out of the dream, takes time for us to come out of the sleep, takes time for us to come out of the conditioned state that we're in and gradually open ourselves up to actually being present to reality, to actually be present to what the actual experience is that's here. And when you're present to that experience, you recognize there are not two. There's only one thing ever happening. Only one thing ever happening in reality, in experience. Yeah. He said the experience of awareness is love, right? So then we have to say, well, what does that mean? Well, what is love, right? Love is the experience that what you are is all there is. Love is the experience of the absence of resistance. It's the experience of the awareness itself is love. Unconditional love. Unconditional love means that there's no resistance to anything, there's no judgment, evaluation to anything. Everything is allowed to be as it is, right? That's unconditional love, right? If you apply that to people in your life, right? If you allow people in your life to be as they are, without judgment or evaluation, right? That's love, right? So he's not defining love and saying that awareness is defined as love. He's saying love is the experience one has when you're being who you are. You don't experience being separate from anything. You don't experience being different from other people, right? There is an affinity. There is there's nothing in the way of being intimate with everything that appears. Nothing in the way of being intimate with everything that appears. So is that not love? When two people are in love, right? There's intimacy, right? There's intimacy. They feel that there is no distance or difference between them, right? Even in that form of love, that's the way it is. In the ultimate experience of love, that's the experience that you're having all the time. There's no distance between you and the world. There is no distance between everything that appears and the awareness that it appears in. It's the same thing. So love is the experience of no resistance, the experience of no judgment and evaluation, allowing everything to be the way it is. And there's peace, and there's this experience of unconditional love. And there's no distance, there's no thinking about it. It's just happening the way it's happening.